On June 30, 1956, two planes collided over the Grand Canyon in one of the largest commercial airline disasters in American history. The planes both were flying out of Los Angeles International Airport that Saturday morning, and both had encountered short delays. The Trans World Airlines flight was scheduled to take off for Kansas City, Missouri, at 8:30 a.m., but was delayed for minor maintenance. The plane took off at 9:01 a.m., according to an accident investigation report from the Civil Aeronautics Board. The United Airlines flight took off for Chicago at 9:04 a.m., 3 minutes after the TWA flight, according to the report. The crash, blamed on turbulent weather, outdated visual flight rules and a lack of communication, would be fully detailed in the 1957 report on the accident. According to the report, TWA Flight 2, flown by Captain Jack Gandy, flew north over the San Bernardino Mountains at a speed of 270 knots and an elevation of 19,000 feet. United Flight 718, flown by Captain Robert Shirley, flew east over Palm Springs at a speed of 288 knots and an elevation of 21,000 feet. The two should have crossed paths without a problem and made it to their respective destinations with no problem. Everything went as planned for about 15 minutes. Then Gandy called in to report turbulence. He requested approval to begin flying at 21,000 feet to avoid an overcast area up ahead. His request was denied, but he was granted permission to fly 1,000 feet on top of the bad weather. According to the flight information manual at the time, air traffic clearances which specify at least 1,000 feet above all clouds in lieu of a cruising altitude permits flight to be conducted at any altitude at or above the minimum en route altitude, which is 1,000 feet or more above the cloud layer. 1,000 on top operations are common, but put a lot more responsibility on the pilots when it comes to air traffic, the manual reads. The maneuver would limit how much information the pilot would be able to receive about how close the plane was to other planes, leaving the pilot to rely on what he could see. With the implementation of flight radars and satellite surveillance, 1,000 on top operations are not used anymore, according to Ian Gregor, a FAA spokesman. The type of radar and satellite surveillance we have today is far different from what existed 60 years ago, he said. As a result, pilots would not typically need or ask to fly above the weather today. Pilots do sometimes request altitude changes to get above or below turbulence, and air traffic control will grant those if it is safe to do so. A critical lack of communication. Nearly 400 relatives and friends of the 70 people who died in the crash of a TWA super constellation over the Grand Canyon June 30, 1956 attend a mass funeral service in Flagstaff, Arizona. 67 caskets were lowered into a common grave on July 8, 1956. When Gandy was granted permission to move to 1,000 above the clouds, the investigation report says, Shirley was not notified, even though it meant that the two aircraft would be flying over the same area at the same altitude, at around the same time. The last coherent reports from the pilots were reportedly received just before 10 a.m., according to the accident investigation. At 10:30, aeronautical radio communicators in Salt Lake City received a call that was indecipherable. According to the report, after weeks of studying, the message was finally interpreted: Salt Lake, United 718. We're going in. About 10:31 a.m., the two planes collided over the Grand Canyon. The report states that the pilot's vision likely was obstructed by clouds that were moving in and out of the area at the time, and they probably did not see each other until it was too late to move. The collision likely occurred over the confluence of the Colorado River and the Little Colorado River, according to the accident report. The two planes crashed downwards, with the TWA plane landing on the northeast portion of Temple Butte and the United plane coming to rest on the south side of Chore Butte. The left wing of the United plane was found near the wreckage from the TWA plane. The impact resulted in fires at both wreckage sites. All 128 passengers were killed. According to a New York Times article from 1956, two brothers were first to find the wreckage. Mr. Coffin, Lynn Coffin, then chief ranger at Grand Canyon National Park, said the find was made by Palin and Henry Hudgen, brothers who operate the Grand Canyon Airlines, the article said. The brothers said the wreckage was on the side of a butte about 1,000 feet above the Colorado River, in rugged terrain difficult to enter. The wreckage was scattered over the hillside, they said, and 2 fires were burning in the area. The crash site is now informally known as Crash Canyon and is a popular tourist attraction. Many people like to hike through the area, looking for the scattered remains of the 60-year-old tragedy. Some of the wreckage is still resting in the canyon, glistening metal to remind hikers of the event on sunny days. A wake-up call for aviation. Some good did come from the event, though. Although 65 crashes similar to this one had occurred from 1950 to 1955, this one was a wake-up call for aviation. The accident dramatized the fact that, even though U.S. air traffic had more than doubled since the end of World War II, little had been done to mitigate the risk of mid-air collisions, according to the FAA. In 1958, inspired by this crash and others, the Federal Aviation Association was born. According to the FAA, the Federal Aviation Act was proposed in May 1958 by Senator Mike Mulroney from Oklahoma, hoping to increase safety of national airspace. The act was signed by President Dwight Eisenhower 2 months later.